Alistair Jackson, I wanted to talk to you first of all. Some days since your programme aired, of course, but take us back to the making of it and tell us a little bit about your feeling about these women coming to you. How big a decision would you say that it was for these women to come to you and talk openly about their stories?
Well, of course, this investigation started some years ago with journalists at the Sunday Times first attempting to progress and build confidence in these women. We joined them about a couple of years ago, and obviously ever since then, with our brilliant colleagues at the Sunday Times and Times, one of the key things has, of course, been attempting to give these women the confidence to tell their stories, and that has been a process that's been continuing all the way through, right up into transmission and now. And of course, that's a very difficult thing to do. And it's not only hearing their stories, it's also giving them the confidence to share details that enables us to have the confidence to broadcast them. So it was a massive undertaking on the parts of the journalists that were working on the investigations, but of course, a huge step for the women themselves to allow us to broadcast their stories and their allegations.
Well, yes, and some people have been asking, haven't they, why these women chose, Alistair, to talk to you and to the Times and the Sunday Times rather than the police. Is that something that you asked yourself? Would you have an answer to that?
Well, of course, but we know from these stories, and we know from looking at the justice system here in this country, that the police and the courts, their record on delivering justice for people who are making these allegations is not a great one. And of course, that is one of the reasons why the women involved considered that they didn't want to go to the police, because they couldn't be entirely sure that it would be, actually run all the way through to the result that they wanted it to be. And of course, a big factor here, of course, as one of the ladies said in our film, is that this man's celebrity was another factor at the time that these incidents happened, that they were considering. How would I be listened to making allegations against a man of such prominence, of such profile, who was at that point really dominating large parts of the media? So I think that was a key factor, and of course, not just with this story, but so many others. Looking back on the history of these types of allegations, of course, Harvey Weinstein's allegations were first made through the journalistic avenue before the courts got involved.
And Esella, Russell Brand has denied all the allegations. He also said, as part of his video that he put out, with that denial, he said he believed he was part of a coordinated attack. Some of his supporters are saying the fact that there was more than one media company, not just Dispatches, but also the Times and the Sunday Times, working on these allegations, showed that it was an establishment stitch-up. What would you say to those people?
I think, we were very aware through the making of the programme that might be the sort of rebuttal that he would, or the course of action that he would choose to follow. I think it takes a large number of people to make a programme of that nature. It's a huge team effort. It's not possible for one organisation to make a film. So it's inevitable that there's going to be several different players within that. We were very conscious that was possibly going to be the decision that he would make to choose to launch an attack on the mainstream media. But I think it's pretty clear from the programme that we put together that the allegations were of such a nature that that those two things have to be separated.
And Esella, the contact details were put out in full at the end of the documentary, weren't they? So what's the reaction been since it's airing, and have other people come forward to you since it went out?
It's been really interesting. I mean, we've had contacts from people from various different stages of Russell Brand's career since the programme aired, from the early days when he was getting into acting, right through to the later part of his television career. But one thing I think is really clear that to us that it's much more straightforward for people to come forward now the film has aired. There's a confidence and a reassurance that people are not alone in coming forward with stories. But during the making of the film, it was that much harder for people to share those stories. And I think, particularly within the television industry and to a large extent comedy, although that isn't an area that I'm as familiar with, but within television for sure, it was very difficult for people to speak about it. And there are all sorts of reasons for that, not least, people being worried about their, future careers or, their jobs being on the line. So I think, what we may see over the next sort of weeks and months are people sort of feeling a confidence about being able to speak about it. And I hope that in some way the film has enabled people to do that.
And Alistair Jackson, if new claims do come in, do you plan to investigate them? Will your work continue?
Well, I think, as you said at the start, this isn't a process that can happen quickly when these types of allegations are made to you. There's a lot of research that needs to be done around them, so it's too early, I think, to sort of come to that conclusion. I mean, just to pick up on Esella's point, I think one of the things that's important since the film has been broadcast only yesterday, we see this allegation being made of an allegation in the BBC's LA studios or in the surroundings of that. According to that report, the BBC were informed about that in 2019. I think it's important to remember that we offered the BBC an opportunity to look and see if there'd been any complaints. They used an exemption on the freedom of information laws to not be clear about that, and in their responses to the programme, they haven't been cleared about that. And now we learn, according to that report, BBC management were informed about it in 2019. So, I think there are now, regardless of the allegations themselves, there's a building case for the BBC and other organisations to tell us exactly what they knew when, because on the face of that report, that's something that they were told back in 2019. So, regardless of any further programmes or allegations, what we know at the moment needs explanation, and we're still waiting for that.
Yeah, and we should say that we've approached Russell Brand to give his response to those allegations and have not heard back from him yet. And we refer people to his previous denials. And also the BBC have said they're very sorry to hear of these latest allegations and they're going to look into them. They're talking about a review into those. Esella, talking of broadcasters, how complicated was it for you that Dispatches is aired by Channel 4, a broadcaster which also had Russell Brand on air? Did that make things difficult for you?
In theory, it ought to have done, but I was very heartened actually by the ability that we had, or the freedom we had, to apply the same rigour to Channel 4 as we did to any of the other players within the investigation. We were not prevented at any point from asking difficult questions. We submitted freedom of informations to the BBC and similar requests to Channel 4. We went through all the archive that we had at our fingertips with the same rigour applied to BBC Archive and Channel 4 and anywhere else that Russell Brand may have featured. There was absolutely no sense from within our own production, but also the expectation from the commissioners at Channel 4 that we shouldn't look at things because they were Channel 4 productions.